This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Welcome to the 520th episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight we discuss Cortex Primer traits in your tabletop role-playing games. But first, my name is
Chris.
And I am Old Man Logan.
All right, let's do some announcements. First thing is Phil's not here this week because he's on vacation.
Papa Panda is on the road.
Another thing is we have a Patreon.
We do have a Patreon.
Yeah, if you are going to patronize or patron, you don't want to, I mean, you can patronize us if you want.
I mean, technically that's the derivation of the word.
Isn't it just to be a patron of the Patreon? I don't, because patronize does it have multiple definitions where one of them is to...
I'm sure it is.
Oh, interesting. We should look that up at some point.
Like if you go to a bar, you are a patron of the bar, you are patronizing that bar.
I guess so, yes. So if you were going to patronize us, you can get the Bamboo Lounge and the After Show at our lowest levels. If you want to give us a few more shekels, you can get Children of the Shroud stuff, such as...
Well, we have character sheets.
Yes.
Which are kind of cool.
We have Behind the Screen by Phil.
Yes, Behind the Screen. That's what BTS stands for because I couldn't remember what it was. And that's why I skipped that one.
I thought they were some sort of Korean pop band.
BTS.
If you're into the K-pops.
Yeah, I mean, I like me some K-pop sometimes.
Webster's defines patronize as to act as a patron of, provide aid or support for, or to adapt an air of condescension towards, treat haughtily or
It is
coolly,
both.
Or to be a frequent or regular customer or client of.
It's all three of those things, huh?
Yes, it is.
Interesting.
Many much definitions.
So join our patron.
You can also get game rules and some flash fiction at times, like our Angel thing that I recorded and we had the document of.
Yes.
Cool. There we go. Those are our announcements. Now we are going to go to the garage to talk about Cortex traits.
Access granted.
Traits are the building blocks of Cortex games. We build our dice pools from them. The fiction created at the table is influenced and funneled through them. They're the most prime of Cortex Prime. In the Core of Cortex section of the Cortex Prime book, the first thing you're told to do is to write down your character's name and one central thing they're good at. This is their trait. You can't have a Cortex Prime game without traits. Before we define our terms, I just want to say we're going to talk about and reference other Cortex mechanics during this discussion. We may or may not take a moment to go over them. If you listen to our Children of the Shroud games, which there's a bunch of them now, you will get the gist of how these other parts of the game work, but this discussion is going to be focused on traits. So now let's define our terms. What is a trait? A trait is a descriptive label with a die rating attached. A descriptive label is a word or phrase that tells you what the trait is doing in play. The die rating is a die type or set of dice that let the players know how much impact the trait has on the game. A D4 being a weak trait and a D12 being a very impactful trait. Here's two examples to help clarify. From the character sheet point of view, let's talk about Geek D10. Geek informs us how much mental acuity, mundane recall, and observation a character has. A D10 rating means the character is very intelligent, but not at the highest level of intelligence one could be. Now let's talk about a trait from the table point of view. Let's talk about Strain in the Shroud D8. Strain in the Shroud informs us how much the Shroud has been strained. We have it in our game pretty often. And we know that if it goes beyond D12, it's going to be a problem for those of us who work within the Veil's rules. A D8 rating means that there's been some pushing on the Shroud, and whatever is causing that pushing should stop until the Shroud recovers, but we're not really in dire straits yet. Now that we've defined our terms, let's get into the description of types of traits. So there are a lot of different types of traits in Cortex Prime games. These include, but are not limited to, attributes, distinctions, skills, affiliations, relationships, powers, roles, and values. That's a whole bunch, let me tell you. I want to focus in now on trait sets. Trait sets are any collection of traits that belong to the same basic type. You can only add one trait from a trait set to a die pool without added cost. This added cost varies from game to game, but it is often a plot point. Attributes, relationships, powers, roles, skills, and values are a few kinds of trait sets, but you can make up whatever kind of sets you want, especially to fit them for your game. In our Children of the Shroud game, we have roles defined as emo, geek, jock, performer, and popular. I talked about geek earlier. That's mental acuity, mundane, recall, and observation. But the other four, jock, physical activities and actions, popular, your connections, the power of your social network and social currency, emo, which is the weird fringe knowledge and understanding, your feelings and empathy, and then there's performer, which are social skills, lying, acting, performing, that kind of stuff. Taking that a step further, this trait set in our game influences how you interact with these cliques in high school. It's kind of performing double duty, which is why we built it that way. We are also using relationships, affiliations, and distinctions as trait sets. We'll probably talk about them a little bit more later and how they're functioning in our game, but I want to talk right now about the universal trait set, distinctions. Distinctions, I want to paraphrase from the Cortex Prime book. They're sort of like your character's elevator pitch. If you read all of someone's distinctions, they should tell you a lot about that person's character. They can describe the character's personality, quirks, their role in the world, how they see themselves, really any number of things, but they do a lot of work to give you as a player touchstones to help bring that character to life through play. According to Cam Banks, the designer of Cortex Prime, every Cortex Prime game has distinctions. You can mess with or modify any of the other traits and trait sets, but the game was designed with distinctions as a cornerstone of the experience. All right, let's talk about our Children of the Shroud game real quick. So we have Henry Gunny Gunderson, that's Bob's character. He has these distinctions: I can't disappoint my mom, sins of the father, and a leaf on the wind. So what does this tell us about Bob's character? First, he has a strong relationship with his mother and doesn't want to let her down for some reason. We're not quite sure what that means until play starts, and that comes up in the story, but at least we have an idea of that. We also know that his father has done something wrong that is probably passed down onto him. That's the sins of the father. And Leaf on the Wind means he's probably quite quick and has some kind of air magic if you look at our setting of magical high school swashbuckling adventure and drama. The last thing to mention is that each of these distinctions is rated at a D8, which makes them useful, but not overpowering. I like putting D8s in my dice pool. It feels good. Now let's move on to temporary traits. So these are traits which last for a short time, like a scene or a session. They often go away when they're no longer relevant to a situation, and I believe that the temporary trait is the Swiss Army knife of Cortex Prime games. So these temporary traits, they sit on the table, and assets and complications are the most common examples of temporary traits. They come up a lot, so let's get into them. Assets. They get included in a die pool when they're applicable and helpful, and there are 3 ways to create them. You can spend a resource called a plot point to create a D6 asset for the scene. There are certain abilities called SFX which allow for the creation of D8 assets. These are referred to as stunts. They are often on your character sheets. And you can also take an action to make an asset by rolling against a difficulty. Now, there are some rules surrounding this which we're not going to get into right now, but in a future primer we will. Now let's talk about complications. Complications are traits that go into the opposing die pool to make it harder to succeed. Makes sense? This works for both player characters and GMPCs. Before we can talk more about complications, we need to talk about hitches. A hitch is when the players roll dice and one or more of them come up as ones. When a 1 is rolled, the GM can buy it from the players for a plot point. Now, I've mentioned plot points a few times, but let's talk about it a little bit more. These are the core currency of Cortex Prime games. There's an economy in the game where plot points will flow back and forth between players and Game Master. The Game Master, depending on the game, could have an infinite amount of plot points to then pay for hitches and such, while the players have a variety of ways to acquire plot points so that they can spend them to help them succeed at things. In a future Cortex Primer, we will do a deeper dive into plot points, but hitches and rolling them is one of the ways to get them as players. Once that plot point is paid to the player, a complication is created. Complications will go away as the fiction dictates, but if they're a little more sticky, like say a gunshot wound, they can be dealt with by making a test to get rid of them. A test is what you would consider a check in other games. You probably need some fictional positioning also to get rid of your gunshot wound. Like if you don't have somebody that can stitch up a gunshot wound, it's not going away. Aside from assets and complications, there is the potential for other floating traits that just exist in a scene that can either assist or hinder the players. They can also just be traits that sit in the scene that have the opportunity to be interacted with, but don't really hinder or help the characters to begin with. For instance, say there's a chandelier sitting in the middle of the room at D8. Well, there's a chandelier at D8 just sitting out there. Until someone swings off that chandelier or does something with that chandelier, we don't include it in any die pool. It's not hindering, it's not helping. But as soon as somebody wants to use it as part of their fiction, then it becomes relevant. All right, well, that's all the basic information about traits. Now we're going to talk with the rest of the MMP crew and get a little deeper inside ways that you can use this information inside of a Cortex Prime game. But first, let's talk about another show from Misdirected Mark Productions.
I would love to tell you about Thaco with Advantage. Ange and Jared love talking about RPGs and D&D. Together, they share insights into the games they're running in the campaign journal, and then they tackle a variety of topics that affect the game in the DM's workshop. They're going to talk anyway, so they might as well record it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll even pick up an ancient D&D factoid about a previous edition of the game that you'll never use.
Such as? Anybody got one? I do factoids at the beginning of every episode.
Back in Advanced D&D, the first edition of Advanced D&D, they had stupid rules where different genders had different maximum character stats, and that was just sucky. And even back then, we knew it was a dumb idea. But it existed, and there's still a few grognards out there try it. But if you see it, just ignore it and play the characters you want to play.
I agree.
Yes, have some.
That being said, I did like rolling up some characters in first edition.
It was kind of
D&D.
fun, right? All right, let's move on to our question and discussion points about this. So, trait sets. We're going to talk about them first. Trait sets in play. I am going to pose it to the question. I will ask Jerry first. How do you think we can leverage them in play as a game master?
By setting up various tests and setting up various scenes, you can push a scene towards one or more traits.
I agree.
By different trait sets as well. You can have a whole scene that just focuses on, for example, the school aspect. No matter what else we do, this is going to be related to school. Or it can be something where it's going to be some intellectual, and as a result, it's going to be geek or possibly
Popular or performer.
So you can set each of those up. And so as a result, you can kind of lead that way, but also you can set the game up in such a way that you allow the players to define a little bit of the scene by the traits that they choose. So by putting them in a situation, you can kind of find out what they want to do with it, which then can, again, inform you on what you want to do next. So it goes back and forth, and I think that works really well.
Yeah, I think so. Bob, you and I, because we're smart in the game, like our characters are intelligent, we have
Yes.
fairly high geek stats. Phil often sets up things surrounding that with this academic decathlon stuff that we've been involved in.
Yes, he gives us opportunities to flex those particular traits in scenes to build on the school drama portion of the game
Mm-hmm.
and allow us role-playing interaction with some of the NPCs. And we get some pretty good scenes out of those.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I actually like those scenes a lot. They're very good intro scenes to the stories that we often have been playing so far. The 3 examples that we have of them.
Yeah. Especially when you have to go up against your rival.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, at times, or in story 3, the enemy who's not really the enemy. You'll find out later. Anyways, as a GM for me, like when I'm playing Leverage, but I will refer to our Children of the Shroud game, I will use those trait sets to push players into certain spaces too. Like if they want to scout out a building and Leverage, I mean, we're talking about then, is it going to be the hacker using hacking? Is it going to be the thief using their thief skill to then infiltrate to like find out where all of the entrances and exits are? Stuff like that. So that particular trait set is used for that. Whereas the relationship trait sets are used for, I will leverage them for scene setting. Oh, you want to go talk to your contact? Well, I will utilize this character here that's in your relationships to set a scene because they are probably over here in this space. We just talked about it, really. Like, that's what Lisa does. Like, Lisa's part of the school, so when a scene is set for our rival, my rival, your friend, Bob, then we are in that space to play that kind of game. Other ways that I leverage trait sets as a GM, I don't know that there is a lot of other ways to leverage trait sets as a GM. That's usually how I think of it.
I think it depends a little bit on the trait sets. Like in Aux, we have a very specific thing that allows us to kind of leverage the trait sets, because when we go to do a scientific rescue mission or scientific emergency disaster, we end up choosing out of one of the trait sets. We get to choose one of them, and he gets to choose one that sets that up in the trait set for our actions. We have 5 different actions. When we have to deal with a disaster, we get to choose one of those actions that we want to take. And as a GM, he gets to pick one of those actions that we also are going to have to take. So we're going to have to take 2 actions. And so by leveraging that, he can determine whether, like we say, we want to do fabrication. And he's like, well, I want to see how you're going to implement that. Or we're going to do research and observation to figure out how to figure it out and that sort of thing.
Now, the other great thing that does for Phil in that particular case for that game is he can decide what kind of beat he wants, because implementation is way different from figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we could pick also assemble the solution, which is putting the thing together.
Yep.
Usually Bob's character, Alfarim, who's an engineer, is very good at that.
Yes.
So if that beat has been hit too many times, he can manipulate the beat structure of the sequence of scenes. We pick something and then he's like, well, we haven't seen how to do it yet.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times in the game, we've already figured out how to do it. So he might pick something else, but there's like 5 options for him. In fact, each of the actions is linked to one of those 5 options in our scientific discovery methodology for that game. It's really interesting. I hope we get to show it with you all you folks at some point in the future. It's fascinating.
Eventually we will.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
When it's over with, we've already talked about looking at that. So.
So as a player, when you see a trait set, for instance, in our Children of the Shroud, like there were those 5 traits: geek, emo, performer, popular, jock. When you look at that, how does it make you feel about the game, and what are you looking for when you look at that, and then how does it influence your play of that particular game?
Having, with that example, that says a lot about what the game is doing, because they're very specific things. Emo being all of the emotional and weird type things in the world, and jock, of course, being your athletic type stuff. And so it lends itself towards a very school-like, because of the game that we're playing. They're very school-related type traits, and it gives you a lot of information towards the whole teen angst kind of area of the game. So when I see those, it gives me a very specific mindset. Like, I know where I am with this character because these are the things that I'm going to be using. So I very quickly can get into that mindset of, I'm a teenage kid in school doing stuff in this world. That's where that takes me. If it was, a completely different thing, your mind is going to be taken to a different place because of those traits.
What about you, Jerry?
I think I kind of follow in the same thing. When I'm looking at the trait sets, initially, when building a character, I like to look at how the trait sets are going to inform the character I'm building and the backstory that I want. And then going from there, for example, looking at T, he obviously started out with a low geek score and a high jock score because he was meant to be kind of an ex-jock. So he was going to not be the smartest character on the block and be bigger. And that immediately gave me some image of what that character was like. And by skewing the other trait sets around, like performer and a popular, could say a little bit about what that character was going to be doing moving forward. And in other games, like, for example, in Ox, where my character in the trait sets that gave us all of our scientific backgrounds, I focused heavily on the medical stuff, biology, medicine, but also a little bit of the physical side because Gree's a little bit of an action boy. And
action scientist Gree.
That's right. He's basically a furry Doc Savage. All of that kind of works by just looking at the traits and picking them. You can kind of, just like with any game system, you can kind of skew them. The traits are similar to the attributes you have in other games, but they tend to be more narrative and more informing, and that's what's the important part.
So when I look at it, it really does inform like who my character is for me. So I see this, I'm like, oh, if I'm going to be smart, I don't want to be and I'm not going to be very jock heavy, then that tells me something about me. Also, the popular and the performer tell me other things about me too, as does the emo. Like, my character does not have a very high emo score in that game, Silas, which means I'm not very in touch with my emotions, which I did on purpose because Mesame's magic is very in touch with her emotions, and now I'm all screwed up because my magic is a lot of times influenced by emotions, and I can't handle my emotions because my dad and my mom in that game are not very close to me, especially emotionally. It's a very closed off family. I would say it's not very healthy.
Yeah. And you used, my opinion, you used the conflict between those traits very well to portray how that character was going through all of that stuff.
Honestly, I didn't even think about some of that stuff until I had those traits on the sheet.
Mm-hmm.
They influenced my play, and that's how it changed the way that I played Silas. Because I had some ideas when I came to the table, and then when we started playing, I'm like, I didn't even think about the idea of Mesame's magic being emotion based until we were playing. And then I'm like, oh, emo is all about emotions, and I have a low emo score. I probably can't handle any of this, which is why my magic's all messed up, because I don't know how to tap into it. So I'm slowly tapping into it, and I will eventually start bumping up my emo score to go along with the fact that I'm becoming more in touch with my emotions.
There you go.
That's good.
So it's a thing to think about when you look at these trait sets. Is like, how do they help characterize your character? Just like any stats, pretty much in any role-playing game, right?
Yeah, it's never a bad idea after you've created the trait sets for the game and then sat down and thought what your character is going to do when you get into the game and start playing, is to keep looking over those and review what you've got for those traits and see how that might inform where your character is going or what they're doing. Because like you said, you didn't even realize it at first, and you're like, oh, wait, that's a great opportunity to create some conflict for my character.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never a bad idea to go through and review those again and say, how might this, affect something? So if you're sitting down to create a Cortex Prime game, what is your goal with trait sets when you're doing the building?
My goal when building a trait set is to identify what my genre is and what the goals of the game are, and then build a trait set around that. And hopefully I'm working with the rest of the people that I'm playing this game with. If it's just something we're doing for fun, which most games even that get published often are that anyway, unless you're like using a property that exists. So our game was magical high school swashbuckling. We tried to build trait sets that represented that.
Yes.
Now, Phil did a lot of that work on his own, but we had a fair amount of input into how that worked.
Oh yeah. It was very collaborative.
Yeah.
The 5 clicks, I think Phil came up with those.
No, I think we talked about those.
Did we talk about those?
I think those, and I think that all three of them. I think relationships was something we talked about.
I mean, relationships. Yeah, that was a discussed thing.
I think we collaboratively came up with the general idea of each of those
being clicks,
click type things, and then Phil went through and found the names that he felt were appropriate for each one.
Yes,
and
by thinking about actual clicks in high school.
And then we had a 15-minute discussion about one of them, just trying to figure out the name, which luckily we didn't bother recording. So
yeah, I forget which one was that?
Geek.
Oh, the geek one.
Was geek versus nerd.
Yeah.
We went back and forth on that for a little bit.
That was definitely something that we were involved in though as a team, which was good.
I think we wanted these trait sets. Like we wanted one that was more focused on the school side of things. We wanted one that was more focused on the magic side of things in some way, shape, or form. And then we wanted one that was right in the middle that could flip both ways, which was the affiliations.
Yeah.
Which I think that one has been the most interesting trait set as we've been playing the game, because we built it and then I think we didn't all agree on exactly what those 3 things meant.
We did not. We had to have a couple of discussions about that, because the difference between Veil and Magic, they seem like they're similar, but Veil is all of the stuff relating to the magical society and its rules. And then Magic is all of the magical stuff that's outside of that structure, just magic in general and non-Veil-y things is what we essentially landed on.
And one of the nice things about all the trait sets as you building them is if you build them properly, like I think we did this time, you can narratively shift from one choice to another in the trait set. I mean, we've had things where like Phil wanted to set up, he said, well, this is kind of a Veil thing. And you can make an argument, well, I'm not tapping into the Veil, I'm tapping into the magic of my girlfriend's dead soul. So I'm going to be using the magic side of it in this case, because I think that's more important in this scene, because I'm actually fighting against the Veil in this case. So narratively, the more narrative, the more descriptive, the more role-playing you do, the more flexibility you'll have with these traits, but also the better story you'll tell when you're using the traits.
That's where I'm at with that now too.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, cool, when we were fighting the Lancaster Legends, I'm like, what affiliation are we standing up for?
Yes.
Because that's another way to look at it. Like, where is my mind at while I'm doing this thing? Like, I'm defending the Veil. Or like in your case, you were fighting a bully and you were like, it's totally school for me because I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm thinking about it from that point of view.
Yeah, I was totally vibing the I hate bullies thing. And that's the other thing. When you sit down to look at what trait sets you want to use, we specifically chose in the Children of the Shroud instance, affiliations, where we went with School, Magic, and Veil. And that's a completely different vibe from doing something like Knowledge Areas that we did with Aux, where we have a much longer list, and that very much informs what the game is going to be about, what kind of things you're going to be doing when you make checks.
100% agree. Yeah, I mean, we should talk about that for a second. The Aux thing. Like,
yeah.
We have a longer list. There are knowledge areas that are way more specific in a lot of ways, yet still broad enough.
Yes.
But there's like 12 of them.
Yeah.
And they range from like physics, like physical sciences,
Yep.
to starship piloting and planet-based vehicle.
Yeah. Planetary
piloting.
vehicles, space vehicles, physical sciences, social sciences.
Kinetics, which is basically our action stat.
And what we don't have is a single trait of any sort that allows for combat.
I mean, we could manipulate some of that stuff to be combat type stuff if we wanted to, but we have a thing in our game where we don't do that.
Yeah.
But by not including any that easily lead to combat, the traits themselves lead the game in a situation where you're not going to be fighting things. I mean, in any other role-playing game, Gree would be a freaking combat monster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
But he's not. The only time he gets active is when he's jumping into the maws of creatures. They give him pills and stuff
Yes.
like that.
Mhm.
Very purposeful choices. We said this game is not about combat, it's about scientific genius and the minds of these people doing these amazing scientific things. BDSM.
Yeah.
Beings doing scientific marvels.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
Right? You could easily, in our action list where it's implementation, fabrication,
Observation, communication.
say we wanted to take that game and spin it off just a little bit to the side and say we're going to do a librarian's game, which is a lot of scientific genius
We could.
type stuff.
Yeah.
You could easily take one of those actions, add one that says combat.
Yeah.
Just so that you specifically have, because you've got a guy in there that's going to do some punching.
Mm-hmm.
And then that opens up a whole nother thing where you've got, okay, I'm going to take the combat action and I'm using kinesiology, the action-y thing. Or I'm going to use the combat thing with my life sciences, my life sciences, so I know where to hit this guy to incapacitate him and stuff like that. Totally different flavor.
Yes. With just a very small tweak.
Our action would have to be defenestration.
I mean, removing somebody through a window, always a
Yes.
good idea. All right, let's move on to distinctions. And I want to talk about Gunny's distinctions.
Absolutely.
I can't disappoint my mom. Sins of the father, a leaf on the wind. I mentioned this earlier in the episode. Why did you choose these, and what do they mean for Gunny when you're playing him in a scene, and for where you want to take the character's story, if anywhere?
Right out of the gate, I decided that Gunny is very much in the mold of my mom is my world right now because it's just her and me. Dad's gone. And she has very specific expectations about my life, going to school, getting good grades. But she also runs a small business and it's just her. So she needs all the help she can get. So I have to do double duty. I got to be good at school and I got to help her out. So I said, okay, I can't disappoint my mom. That's going to be a driving force. That's distinction number one. So anything where it's going to be like, hey, this is going to break my mom's heart or something like that, that's the one. I can't disappoint my mom. So I decided that when Gunny got his magic, it's an air-based thing. He's an air elemental. He's going to be a guy that is going to have a lot of movement because of wind, air blowing, that kind of thing. So I decided that I would create something like that so that if I'm moving during a scene, I can leverage that in different circumstances. And then, of course, the middle one, Sins of the Father. My father, when I created the character and started giving Phil his information to play off of, I said, Dad's gone. They told us he died in a car crash. May or may not be true. Don't know. But he was magical, and I'm going to inherit my magic from him. Whether he's around or not, that's going to be where I get it from. And so I thought, okay, whatever happened, whether he was a good guy or not, I inherited more than just his magic. Because I've got his magic, there could be obligations, there could be repercussions left over, things like that.
Phil has hinted at this. He says you have, like, your father has enemies.
Yes, absolutely. And as it turns out, he might very well be a renegade, which is a person that is magical operating outside of the veil, which they don't like.
Except when people hear this episode, they'll have already heard the fact that your father is working with my father.
But that does not mean he's not a renegade.
That's true. Maybe my dad's a renegade too.
So there's it. The plot thickens.
T, why is your character so like baked into the setting as being so normal compared to the rest of us?
Well, because he was actively resisting everything else. He was trying to rebel. He was trying to be normal for so long, and suddenly had responsibility thrust upon him, which is something he wasn't expecting and didn't want, but is now finding that he likes. So that's why he's so normal. He's got a normal family. He's got a normal family as you can get in this setting. He has a stable nuclear family with 2 loving parents that are very supportive and nurturing.
They're so nice.
Yes, they are. He's got siblings that harass him, and all of that together kind of informs the fact that he really doesn't have anything to rebel against, at least initially. And then when he decides to do so, rebel against the family, the magic nature, whatever, that's kind of, now he's got to rely on that. That's one of his distinctions is say my name. Like if he wants to, he can drop his family's name. He doesn't try to do it very often, but there are times that he's going to have to.
I think it's funny that we both have that same, almost like a similar distinction that way. It's
makes
great.
sense. What's part of our back?
It's similar, but it's different just enough.
Yours is almost like intimidating.
Yeah.
Mine is more about peddling influence.
Yeah. That's exactly the difference.
And that's exactly it. That shifts my popular up by 1. Yeah, which is the point.
It just is terrible for people to hear that I'm a flame worth.
Yeah.
Bob, your distinctions. When you're playing gunning in a scene, the one about your mom's easy, right? Like that one moves. What does Sins of the Father do for you when you're in a scene and you hear about your dad?
As a touchstone, it's as I said before, I've got my magic from him, but it's not just the magic. There are other things. So what I do is I keep in mind that there could be a lot of different things that could be involved with being the son of the Winter Wind, right? If he is a renegade, then the powers that be, if they figure out, which I think they already know I'm the son of the Winter Wind, that's fairly common knowledge in the Vale, if I'm not mistaken.
It is very common
the way
knowledge.
It happened.
Yep.
So I'm almost positive they're keeping their eye on me.
Yeah,
because
I imagine so.
Son of a renegade, like, what does he really know about his dad?
Also, the guy who's basically the black ops guy,
the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah, his son has been assigned to you, like your crew, your group, your little coterie of
I wonder
people.
how that worked.
Yeah, I know, right?
Does Silas know? Is Silas being used
Probably.
to keep an eye on me?
I would imagine so.
Probably. I think at this point we've all probably thought of it, and we've all probably come to peace with it because we all get along. We're all friends.
We are. I think one of my favorite things that's happened so far when it comes to the Sins of the Father thing for you is when it comes up in play, like when this is like a thing that your dad did, like you pursue it.
Yeah.
You'll all hear this, I think, in the next week or two, where Bob's character, Gunny, will not stop to find this thing, even to the point where he might be like messing around with the shroud and maybe get seen doing it.
Yep. I took a chance on being seen doing something magical, and the shroud flexed a little.
It did flex a little.
But yeah, that one I think is going to definitely come into play a lot more in the near future because of where that particular path is going right now.
Let's move on to, so I didn't get into SFX earlier about decreasing your distinction to a D4 to getting a plot point. That's a thing that you can do in Cortex games. What does it mean for gameplay and storytelling as a player, Jerry?
It does 2 things. For gameplay, first of all, it allows you a way to easily get plot points.
Yeah, in-game way to get plot points.
If you're low on plot points, you can simply drop your D8 to a D4, and the GM will give you a plot point. However, to really do it well, you should be narrating why you're dropping the distinction to a D4. Either it's interfering with what you're doing, or it's the bad choice for the situation, or something else in the scene is going to be reacting to what you're doing. And again, it makes for a more narrative, more exciting roll. Gives you a plot point, and you can still succeed with it. I mean, we've had several times where that D4 is rolled a 4 instead of rolling a 1. What you're basically doing is giving yourself a 1 in 4 chance of rolling that 1 and giving the GM a plot point in a complication.
Giving the GM a chance to give you another plot point.
Yes, exactly. But you could have the narrative side of things. I mean, if Gunny decides to do Sins of the Father and get his D8, but then drop it to a D4, he might be saying, I'm being distracted by whatever's going on. In Gunny's case, that works even better because Gunny gets if Gunny drops to a D4, he gets a plot point. And if he uses Sins of the Father, he gets a plot point. If he rolls a 1, he'll get a third plot point.
Do you get that for Sins of the Father?
Sins of the Father, whenever he pursues something that's counter to the veil, he gets a plot point.
Oh, that's fun.
That's what the special effect is.
Nice.
So Gunny
that's like a 3-banger right there.
But almost always almost always when Gunny does that, it's complicating the scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be, even when he doesn't take the D4. So taking that D4 makes it an especially complicating situation and makes it interesting. Whenever he brings up Sins of the Father, something cool is going to happen at the table. Whether he rolls well or not, something very cool is about to happen because
it's creating more narrative drive.
I'm with you.
And it was a good choice for distinction. I really liked that distinction.
I was a little worried about it, and actually I still want to have a little conversation with Phil about it because we didn't really have a good conversation about it before we started play because it felt like it was a little too open to interpretation. Phil's going to have to make a judgment call if I say I want to use this kind of a thing. So
I agree with that.
It may be a little loosey-goosey at the moment.
The other thing, though, is you haven't abused it. You've used Sins of the Father on multiple occasions just to get the D8, where you have used it narratively to discuss why it's happening, but haven't pushed against the veil, so you haven't asked for that plot point.
Yeah.
You should have got a plot point for going after the thing.
You should. Yes, that's true.
And I completely didn't even think about it because I was so wrapped up in the scene that I was like, I'm going to do this thing.
I didn't even know that you had that as a special effect.
Yeah.
The thing that's cool is just what you said. You were so wrapped up in the scene, and that distinction drove the narrative of that scene.
Drives play.
Like, you didn't grab that because, I want this mechanical effect. You grabbed it because this is the cool thing that makes sense for my character to do.
Yeah.
And that's what all the traits do on a regular basis is I'm picking this trait because it's interesting. I'm picking this trait because the story says this is going to make things a lot more fun. Succeed or not.
This is why distinctions are so important and why Cam Banks is like, these are distinctions that can't be pulled out of the game. You can pull anything else you want out of the game, but if you pull this out, you're probably not playing a Cortex game anymore.
Yeah. How does a character's distinctions influence you as a GM when preparing and running Cortex games?
That's the first thing I would look at as a GM is what are the character's distinctions, because that's going to tell you what kind of things that the players design their character around doing. From a storytelling standpoint, we know that we want that Gunny's going to want at least every session or two to have some situation where he's going to be dealing with his father's legacy and how that influences the veil. Silas is being put in situations all the time where he can drop his dad's name for better or for worse. And the funniest part is that when Chris plays that, he never wants to drop his dad's name.
Nope.
Sometimes he does it reluctantly. Sometimes he does it deliberately but begrudgingly.
Yep.
And both of those say something about his character. As soon as I see characters' distinctions and I do something in the game that lets a character use that distinction, I'm giving them a chance to tell the story about their character.
All right, let's talk about temporary traits. I mean, I think this personally is where Cortex Prime shines as a game system. The temporary trait, and I said it earlier, is the Swiss Army knife of Cortex games. What are some of your favorite uses of the temporary trait that you've seen, Bob?
Personally, my favorite one so far is the one that Phil came up with, which was not just a trait with a die on it, right? Or a crisis pool. It was a multi-die item where each die represented a different thing that needed to be figured out. So, like, there was a machine in our aux game.
We got to talk about this for a second because this is not in the rules.
Yeah, it needs
Phil
to be
made this
parsed.
up.
Phil came up with this, and I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. So it functions like a crisis pool in a lot of ways, or a mob in some ways. And there are dice on it like you would see in a crisis pool or on a mob, but they're different sizes, and each size is a different part of the machine. And getting rid of that die off of that machine, because we use a lot of timers in that game. There's not a lot of there's no combat.
Yes.
So timers and stress are the things from complications are what harm us.
Yes.
So go ahead. Now that I've laid it out, feel free.
Yeah. So what he did was, here's 4 dice. They each represent a different part of this machine, and you don't know what they are yet, but you have to figure them out. And when you knock the die out, you A, know what that machine does, and B, how it fits into the overall larger machine.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So we basically had to, like, okay, we've got 4 parts of this machine that we've got to figure out. And once we knock all of those dice off, we understand how it all works and we can make the thing do what we want it to do.
and then potentially reverse engineer it.
Yes.
Which is great for our super science game.
Exactly. I thought that was really cool.
Set up a scene real quick. We're in a 11th dimensional space, and it's entropy energy everywhere, destroying us until we get inside of this shield. The machine that we're talking about was the thing that made it so that entropy didn't destroy us. In the base that we were at, the circle that we were at, the ring that we were at. The machine we figured out let us reverse engineer an entropy engine so that we could put it on our ship.
Yes.
Which was really cool. All right. What about you, Jerry?
The first one that comes to mind in Turn of the Shroud is the immigrant song in Gunny's head.
Yeah, immigrant song in Gunny's head was great.
Yep.
Because it was fun and narrative. It wasn't super detrimental. It interfered with things, but it also led the story. In our Ox game, a lot of the temporary traits that have gone on the table have been the result of my character Gree botching. And so we suddenly have either a new crisis or just something different, which part of the fun of these games is that you can have a trait on the table that is positive or negative, or can be used by both sides. By spending plot points and making other rolls, you can sometimes turn that to your advantage. Literally, one of the temporary traits became a sentient character in the party.
And Polly.
Yep.
Yes, the sentient plant fungus. But if you listen to us talk about the games, there's always some traits on the table whenever a scene gets set up that we can all use. But there are some that are going to be specifically pro-party and some that are going to be more antagonistic to the characters, but they can be twisted around to work one way or the other. And it gives the players and their characters one more thing to interact with in the game besides just beat stick in combat or something else. When you get into games that have situations where one player is very specifically suited to the challenge at hand, adding traits to the table gives the other players things to interact with that can allow them to add to the story and also do things that interact in the scene. And instead of just, well, I'm going to add my assistance die for the third roll again for 3 turns. No, I'm going to interact with this. I'm going to use this. I've got an idea of how to use this to help you do this. Or players can actually create their own temporary traits. I want to do this to help the next player do something else. This happens all the time in Ox, where Chris's character Tam is going to attempt to do something, but it's going to be a complicated and difficult maneuver because of the complexity of the code he's trying to break. And so Bob's character Alpha decides to make a code breaking machine, or set something up to set up a VR system for Tam's headset so that makes it easier. So he'll create a temporary asset on the table of VR headset D8, and now Tam gets to add an additional D8 to his roll. It wasn't just an assist thing; it was something active that one player did that created a trait on the table, which makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, that is the third way to create a trait from the previous examples early on. I didn't really go into how to make them, but I will real quick. The way that it works is if you want to create a trait on the table, you have to decide what level you want to make it at, and the game master is allowed to cap it if they want to, and then they will often take 2 dice that are equal to the difficulty. Like if you want to make a D10 asset on the table, they'll take 2d10. That's how that actually works. And then any other assets or traits or whatever's on the table to add to that difficulty if there's like other things out there. And then they will roll and you will roll, and if you succeed, you create the trait. If not, there's a lot of things that could happen. They could create the trait out there, but against you if they wanted to. They could just say it doesn't happen. And any ones that get popped out there can cause all sorts of havoc. So that's generally how the third one works. I didn't explain it. I'm going to explain it again at some future point when I do another primer.
It's also interesting that sometimes temporary traits can be created in one scene and show up again in a later scene based on what's happening.
Well, according to the rules,
yes,
temporary traits go way after the scene unless you play a plot point to make them sticky. That's actually the rule for the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have to pay a plot point for it to be sticky beyond the scene, and you have to pay a plot point to make it usable by
other people
in the party, or other people in general, I should say.
One of the best examples I have of that is when I made the swords, the ice swords in story 2. I paid a plot point to make it usable by everybody.
What about temporary traits that are created by the GM as a...
GM doesn't play the same rules as we do.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But some of those temporary traits may show up. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Like, you create a wild magic surge, and at the end of the scene, it's gone. But that wild magic surge is out there, so the GM might bring it back later on.
Potentially, yeah.
As another thing. By bringing back a temporary trait would be a...
We're just talking about fictional positioning of traits on the table at that point and how they can impact the story later. I agree with you 100%. You're absolutely right.
That's what I was referring to, not player traits. Yep.
There's just a different rules. The game master and the players play by different rules in the game. The GM can do a lot more things than that. Now, if a temporary trait showed up like Wild Surge that got created somewhere, like the poly thing that happened,
Yes.
he made a whole story around that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the game master's prerogative, right? And he didn't have to pay us anything for it. He's just telling a story. Like he's setting scenes and dropping stuff on there.
But it's also a really good example of taking an oops that happened in the middle of a game
absolutely.
and being like, oh, I'm going to play with this and it's going to get in your way.
Yeah, but Jerry, you're absolutely right.
But
Like game masters can do what they want.
But when the GM leans on those temporary traits later on, it adds some continuity to the game
Sure.
and makes things that may at times appear to be random suddenly no longer random.
Yeah, like I said, I agree with you. It's just it's a nice signpost for the game master and the players being like, oh yeah, like in other games that kind of stuff happens. There's just not a trait on the table that makes it happen,
Yes.
right?
And who doesn't like a callback?
I know everybody likes a callback because Jerry's right. It creates continuity.
Yep.
I love it. It's good stuff.
Yep.
What's the most interesting complication or hindrance you've ever seen in a scene?
When we were wading through the area, it was mucky and wet, and you used your magic to pull the water out of the way so that it was more solid ground for us to walk on.
The complication was muddy field.
Yeah. And then you turned around and used it against Lancaster afterward. You said, I'm going to bring that water back.
And use it as swords. Yeah, because I pulled the water out and then I pulled it back in. Yeah. My favorite one is when Phil was like, can I just give you both a plot point and make there be tension between the two of you?
Yes.
Because that created a really interesting narrative to me. And it put a thing on the table that we had to deal with.
Yeah, we had a character-to-character interaction that felt like it should have created
conflict.
And it's like, you guys should probably be mad at each other right now. It feels like, can I just do this? And we're like,
yes,
yeah.
Please do. Also slightly outside the rules, but not really. Like it's a slight rules modification. Normally when you buy hindrances, because we were rolling against each other, I think you were rolling against me to try to make me less angry because I was mad.
Exactly.
And I was rolling against you to see if I was setting the difficulty for you.
Yes.
And we both rolled ones. And it reduced my anger, but it created this other complication of, because I wasn't angry at you, I was angry at something else.
Yeah, I was just trying to bring you down.
Yeah. And then I was mad at you for interfering.
And honestly, if it's not technically playing by the official raw, it was certainly appropriate.
Yeah.
Because we both had ones in a thing where I was trying to talk you down from being angry. Things were said that just like, you guys are mad at each other right now. That like makes perfect sense.
I'm sure you'll hear more about this in 2 weeks when we talk about interplayer conflict. So
I have to say that would be my favorite complication of either game. that was, can't top that one.
Yeah, that was good.
So let's talk a bit. Phil's not here. We can't actually ask him these questions, but about his, he's got like this crisis mod pool and how he started linking them to complications or just free floating traits in a scene. So we played Ox. We had a thing that happened. And there were a bunch of traits on the table and things on the table for a potential fire cane to start, which is a fiery hurricane on a planet.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a tear in space, some cosmic bullshit or something that was like shunting gravity into the planet. And then there was like another problem that went along with that. And that was linked to these other 3 problems, creating humidity and volcanoes erupting and the gravitational stabilizer malfunctioning. So it was like a pyramid of stuff. And then we started dealing with the pyramid of stuff.
Yeah, it was like an interconnected web. The gravity thing was influencing the volcanoes. The volcanoes were creating increased humidity and noxious gases.
Yep.
And so we had to attack the noxious gases and the humidity, or we could turn around and attack the volcanoes to get rid of both of those if we had done the quote unquote effectively.
Yeah. Huh.
And it was this very intricate web of different interconnected things. And we were hitting it from all over the place. And it was a very tense scene that went right down to the wire.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 triggers were the volcano, the tsunamis, and the
malfunctioning gravity stabilizer.
We couldn't all just focus on one thing. Sometimes we had to go after the equipment. And if the tsunamis weren't dealt with, the humidity started to go up. We suddenly had to spend a turn. Somebody had to drop that humidity down a little bit, so that we had an extra turn or 2 to deal with the other problems. So we kept jumping from different points in the pyramid, sometimes assisting each other, sometimes moving around. So it led to the characters doing something different every turn.
Now, let me break down, because without a visual, it's really hard to see all this stuff.
Yeah.
The point is like the stuff at the top of this pyramid would add its dice to the stuff at the bottom of the pyramid. So if we didn't work top down, we would have to deal with larger dice pools.
Yep.
So we dealt with smaller dice pools by working top down, but while that was going on, the stuff at the bottom, which was going to cause more complications, was getting worse.
Yeah.
And that's good design, really. I
Yeah.
think for Cortex. If you're running a Cortex game or you're playing a Cortex game or you're designing some encounters for your Cortex game, that's a really clever way to design your stuff. Top down and make the stuff at the top feed into the dice that are lower down the thing and let the stuff that's lower down cause more complications.
Yep.
All right. I think the last thing that I want to touch on before we get out of here is Phil has this nice little process for providing clues as assets, which are essentially temporary traits. Now, they don't get on the table all the time because the way that clues work in Cortex is that they can be assets, but they also can just be like, here's your clue to move you to the next scene.
Mhm.
Now, the nice thing is when they become assets that we can utilize, then they get a die associated with them.
Yes.
Which means that we can actually use them in dice pools later on. Also, they can create hindrances and complications. So, like, if you're going to run an investigative styled Cortex Prime game, which a lot of times our Aux teams are very investigative.
Yes, we have to figure out stuff.
Yeah, they got that very Star Trek vibe to them. Like,
Yep.
what's the problem? Let's fix it.
If you're running a mystery, one of the clues might end up being something like the corrupt police chief is involved.
That becomes a clue at like D6 or D8.
Now, there are times that the corrupt police chief is involved will be something we can use to move on to another clue or to get more information, but it can also be something that we start getting too close and now the GM can also lean on that exact same temporary asset to say, you have to be careful because the police are looking for you because the corrupt
police
chief
chief,
is
yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
And so it works both ways, and I like that.
Yeah, and you can put triggers on that too. Like if
Mhm.
you say if it gets to a D10 because you find another clue that implicates that the police chief is corrupt as like part of your clue, which you can use as evidence later.
Yep.
And the police chief finds out about it. Now that D10 is not just your clue for like solving the crime later potentially, but also his die that you add into dice pools when the officers of the law are chasing you down.
Yes, or when his vendetta against you starts to, inflame.
Because then the police chief can start like bending laws to make your life harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good stuff. All right. Well, that's our episode on traits. I hope you enjoyed that primer and that more in-depth discussion about that. Join us next month for another Cortex Primer on some other topic within Cortex Prime. Now, as we begin to wrap up the show, we'll begin with some Patreon shoutouts. Let's begin with the Queen's Court. Lars Henrik Evjan, the Lord Out of Time. Jim, our Royal Merchant Emeritus. Chromatic Chameleon, the Queen's Spy Mistress. J.T. Evans, the Queen's Librarian. Schmitty, the Keeper of the Labyrinth. Andrew Dacey, the Warden of Whiskies, one of my favorites. Andy Olson, the Duke of Dice, the Whiskies is because I like whiskey. John Carney, the Court Necromancer, we have determined that he is actually evil according to him. Craig, the Lord of One Name. Tiberius Starcrash Smith, the Baron of Britannia, and Kevin Lovecraft, the Royal Beard, and boy is that beard luscious. Other patrons include Chris Constantine, Miko Froelich, Eric Simon, Not That Billy Mitchell, Fiona, Huxley, Kathleen Halperin, Christopher Gamelk, Michael Beck Esperum, Joseph Knoll, Carlos, Hep Dilemma, Michael Draper, Alice Cura, Jim Fitzpatrick, Brantley Harris, Steve Radabaugh, Rory McLeod, Ninjabi, Joseph Peralta, Brian Kurtz, my Brett, not my Brett, but somebody's Brett, Chris Steele, Jared Rasher, Eileen Barnes, and Brandon Barnes. Thank you so much for being our patrons. If you like this show, you can hear more just like it at misdirectedmark.com. And if that's not enough, you can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/MMP, which has hundreds of bonus episodes. Aside from the bonus episodes from the After Show and the Bamboo Lounge, you also get our MM Plays game stuff like Phil's nifty setting for the Children of the Shroud, our characters there, the mods we've been using, Phil's Sessions of a worksheet, which is still up there. And beyond that, there is my game notes on the Lamplighter system, which will power the Streets of Avalon RPG, which is now currently in playtesting. You also get, most importantly, access to our Slack channel where you can talk to us pretty consistently. If the Slack channel isn't your thing, you can email us at mmp@misdirectedmark.com or hit us up on Twitter. @misdirectedmark is the best place to get a response. Last, we have a bunch of other shows. We mentioned one of them already, but the roster includes Pandas Talking Games, the Gnomecast, Bonus Experience, and Thaco with Advantage. If that's not enough content for you, we have friends. There's the Tabletop Bellhop, your cardboard concierge. The Knights of the Night, they have an excellent AP series going on currently right now about the Dresden Files. Mastering Dungeons, which is all about 5th edition D&D, you can get that on the YouTubes. And then, of course, How to RPG by Sean P. Kelly of Gaming and BS. You can catch him live Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. at the aforementioned YouTubes. Well, this has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop. We out.